Okay, I will reconvene the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of February 29th. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that's not scheduled for this agenda. Seeing no one, I will close public comment and go to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of February 15th. I had a motion by Lavoie, second by Murray. Any additions, corrections, or comments? Anyone? Seeing no one, all in favor of the minutes as submitted? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Go on to the consent calendar. Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, item A at 19 West Carrillo Street was continued 2 weeks. Item B at 1111 East Cabrillo Boulevard was given positive comments and continued to the staff hearing officer. Item C, 1111 East Cabrillo Boulevard was continued 2 weeks. Item D, 500 Ninos Drive was final approval as submitted. Item E, 811 State Street was preliminary and final approval as submitted of option 2. Item F, 217 Helena Avenue was continued 2 weeks to the full board. And item G, 25 West Montecito Street was indefinitely continued to the full board. And
Indefinitely?
Indefinitely, okay. Yes. And those were all reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
Motion to ratify the consent calendar.
Motion by Lavoie, second by Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is announcements, and if I could just start with a brief announcement. Yesterday, we lost a very important member of this community, a relative of mine, a dear friend of mine. Robert Livernoy passed away after a long illness, and I don't know how many of you know how instrumental Mr. Livernoy was in starting Brinkerhoff and making Brinkerhoff really what it is today. Without him, it would never be what it is today, and I'm very, very saddened that he's gone. He was a dear friend. Staff.
I have just one announcement.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate that the Landmarks Commission send their condolences to his wife?
I think so.
I would like to see that done.
Okay. Would you draft a letter? Would you be
I
willing
was
to?
just thinking of sending a card with your signature.
All
I
right.
can bring you one.
Okay. Very well. Go ahead, Ms. Kentz.
Chair Suding will be stepping down from item 3 at 1722 State Street. Commissioner Drury actually is here now. Okay, and that's all I have.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Schellenberger.
during the workshop, there was mention made of the airport building, and the original building has been moved to its new location.
Great.
I don't know if anybody's been out to see it lately, but I think it's still up on temporary foundation. But
Have you seen the photograph of it totally surrounded by water?
I have not. At least it's not underwater.
And then just one other announcement. It's not really a subcommittee report since it's not a subcommittee, but I did attend the Joint City Council and Planning Commission work session yesterday, actually, here in this room. And we talked about, or staff talked about implementation of Plan Santa Barbara, as well as the progress and the status of the historic preservation element. All of the commissioners and council members were very supportive of the historic preservation element, as well as excited about it. So we're looking forward to wrapping that up and then going on to some of the phase 1 implementation items. And if any of you have any questions about anything, I'd be happy to get an answer for you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner
The element
Marias.
committee met yesterday, and we will have what will be distributed to us now is the final draft with all of our changes, which should be available starting Monday thanks to Heather. I would also like to remind commissioners that you have a deadline for filing your conflict of interest statements. I believe the deadline is very first part of March, and I would suggest you get it done. It's a $10 a day fine otherwise, and they do collect.
Okay.
I would like to further add that you do it online and print it, sign it, and take it in.
Yeah.
This year, it's not going to be done totally online. You still have to walk it into the city clerk's
Correct.
Or mail it in.
or mail.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that additional piece of information. Any other announcements? How about subcommittee reports? Anybody?
I have a question, if I could at this time ask.
Go ahead.
We have seen various projects that we were told would be coming back to us. I think of the bridge on Cabrillo, the De La Guerra Plaza, the library. There have been numerous projects, and the last two were mentioned, and staff said that they would get back to us because this involved the redevelopment agency money and things like that. We've had no information back, and these things sort of end up in Never Never Land, and it'd be nice if we knew what was going on, if they're going to be dropped, if they're going to continue, or what. And so I would hope that we could have some comments from staff as to these status, these projects that have been here for us for some review but never just disappeared. You don't have to do it now.
No, I'm
but-
glad. I think that's what you're asking, the status. My understanding is that the redevelopment agency has been dissolved, and therefore we're in the process of trying to go through the inventory of projects that were scheduled to be either funded or completed. And my understanding is not La Cumbre, but it's De La Guerra Plaza and the library project are essentially been stopped because of the funding issues involving redevelopment monies. So I don't think they will be coming back. The city council may find monies for those projects. I know the city police department building has also been impacted because of the
That's
redevelopment
another
funds.
one, yeah.
As far as the Cabrillo bridge, that project will be returning back soon because they have a temporary bridge that they were proposing to install. They now are looking to propose a more permanent structure of that, so that will return shortly with your review of that bridge
Yeah, I would
project.
just like to keep abreast of what's going on and
Sure.
have them not into Never Never Land.
Well, if they die, I'll let you know. I don't. It's premature to
We'll
say
come to
they're
the
dead
funeral.
yet. Okay.
Thank you very much, Tinkerbell. All right, next item on the agenda.
What?
You kept saying Never Never Land, so I figured you were Tinkerbell.
You're blushing.
Yeah. I'm hot.
So are you.
Our next item is item number 1, 200 East Carrillo Street. This is a proposal for upgrades to an approved AT&T wireless communication facilities. The project requires no visual impact findings. Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. Hello. Yeah. We just have one set of plans? Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hold on one second. Let's just get the rest of the plans out available. Thank you. Okay. All right, everybody ready? Okay, if you could introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation, please.
Okay, good afternoon, Commission and staff. My name is Margaret Chang, representing AT&T Wireless, and a modification to an existing AT&T.
It is on. If you could try to speak louder.
Oh, okay. I don't want to breathe on it. My name is Margaret Chang, representing AT&T Wireless on this modification project under agenda item number 1. Should I give my address?
No.
Okay. And would you like me to give a brief summary of the project?
Please.
Basically, AT&T has an existing wireless facility stealth mounted on this building, and we are proposing to modify it to upgrade it to the 4G status, as there's been all the different carriers are now upgrading all their existing wireless facilities in order to accommodate all the iPhones and the tablets that people are using, all the increase in data demand. So in this particular site, we are what we're doing is we are switching out there's 12 existing antennas mounted on this building, and it's completely concealed behind fiberglass screening. And we are replacing all 12 of those antennas with the new antenna, the new technology, which is called LTE, long-term evolution, to provide more data capacity and coverage for our existing customers. So we are essentially not increasing the number of antennas, we're switching them out. However, one of the sectors we have to move because the coverage demand in that area is more. There's more requirements in that area, so we do have to move the stealth box on the one. Could I show you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, on this sheet, there is the before, the existing and the proposed plan. So here is the existing site plan as it shows here. We have the existing sectors that are completely screened, and in the new proposal, what we're doing is we're actually shifting.
Yep, put the microphone to you. Yeah, that kind of has to follow you.
We're actually moving the screen box. We have to shift the antennas to propagate in that direction. So we are extending the screen by 12 feet horizontally. Oh,
That might help.
thank you.
Everybody laughs at my pointer.
So essentially, the facility will look the same, except for this area where we're extending the screening out by 12 feet horizontally. So it essentially kind of ends right here. And the photo simulations...
It's probably best shown there.
Correct. See, this is, as it is existing right now, you could see it kind of tapers in right here, which is this area. Right here, it tapers in right here. That's the shot, looking this way. And then so once this modification is complete, it would look this way. So it would basically fill in that penthouse area up here. And that is the visual, the only visual change that would come by this expansion. And Susan had actually called me and told me there was a slight concern in regards to the proposed GPS antenna that we're proposing as part of this expansion, because it was. Let me show you.
Yeah.
And we don't usually get that. GPS antennas usually aren't an issue, so I'm really appreciative she told me that in advance so that I could address this. So here is a GPS antenna that we're proposed antenna. And it is located approximately 3 feet from this parapet right here. And really, we don't think that this would be a visual impact, but to be safe, we ended up moving it. I had enough time because she had told me about the possible concern, to get the authorization to move it further into the center of the roof. So it's 10 feet from the parapet, so it will definitely not be an issue. So these are really the only two, I guess, visual possible concerns.
Okay, so let me ask you a quick question.
Yes.
Then. Are the proposed antennas different in height or size than the existing?
The existing antennas are 4 feet tall, and the new ones are 4 feet 3 inches tall.
So 3 inches larger, but they're still not going to stick above the parapet.
No, what we're going to do is we're going to keep our approved height, which is our approved height is, I cannot read backwards. Where is the top of-
4 foot panel.
So our existing approved antennas are 69 feet to top of the screening, and that will remain. So the additional 3 inches will just go down because we have space to work with underneath the screening.
Any other questions from commissioners? comment?
The only thing I can't tell is on plan on one of the...
Microphone.
I just would love to see on maybe just marked up on the photograph of where the addition is on the, yeah, exactly. I just couldn't see that.
If I may,
Yes.
and correct me if
you.
I'm wrong, but right now it's like that,
Okay.
and
Thanks.
now
We
it's just going to be
couldn't
filled
tell
in.
that.
So I think it actually looks better and makes more sense that it's filled in. But
Thank you.
comments then from anyone?
Public hearing.
I'm sorry. Oh, public comment. I will open public comment. I will close public comment. See no speaker slips present, and go to comments from the commission. Is this ready for approval? Okay. Whoever makes the motion needs to state that the project has been reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission as to the site, color, and size of the proposed antennas, so as to minimize any adverse visual impact.
So moved.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We would also like for you to...
That was excuse me, I'm sorry. A motion by Sharp and a second by Schallenberger. Okay, go ahead.
We would like you to consider adding a condition that the existing screening be repaired and brought back to an acceptable appearance, because it's getting dilapidated looking.
Does it make-
Repainted, perhaps?
Yeah, is the maker of the motion?
Yes, and I would also like to add that this includes moving the GPS antenna from 3 to 10 feet from the parapet.
And I believe that's shown on the plans now, right?
Oh,
Yes, the new plans. These are the older
Okay.
ones, but I did.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner.
may I
Arias?
ask the maker of the motion to add, along with be repaired and maintained,
Yeah.
be added?
Absolutely. Maintain.
Be repaired and maintained.
Repaired and maintained.
Okay with the seconder?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. You're on your way.
thank you very much.
Okay. So we'll take these, but you can take that drawing and make sure that you get a new updated drawing to staff, please.
Yeah.
Here you go, Susan. Okay, we are 10 minutes away from the next item, so I'm going to recess. Next item on the agenda is item number 2. This is the 0 block of West Mason Street. Project design approval is requested. This requires compliance with City Council Resolution number 01-137. Project was last reviewed on January 18th of 2012, and this is a proposal to replace Mason Street Bridge over Mission Creek. So if you could state your name for the record and give us a brief presentation, and you're welcome to use the pointer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. John Iwasiak, Principal Civil Engineer for the Public Works Department, and I'm happy to return on this Mason Bridge replacement project and give you an update of the information and the responses to the January 18th HLC Commission comments. So I'd like to walk through the comments, but
recite the comments.
I can. I think it would be a good idea, and I also have.
And then I have a little preamble, and then I'd like to step through the comments so that we can be responsive to the comments.
So why don't I go through the comments from the last meeting, which was January 18th of 2012. We had four public comments, and there was a straw vote how many commissioners could support the westerly bridge alignment, and that was a 7-1. So the motion, Commission appreciates the research of the project as presented today. The majority of the commissioners support the western bridge alignment. Construction at the foot of the habitat exposed zones should include tidewater goby. Develop details for the underside of the bridge. Provide significant sized trees to provide shade as soon as possible. The faux sandstone needs work. Perhaps use existing sandstone. A majority of the Commission felt the proposed tree mitigation measures were acceptable. Reduce the width of the bridge. 36 feet appears too wide. The bridge should be consistent with the residential neighborhood setting. Investigate exceptions to federal standard. Provide a plan showing the quantity of sycamore trees proposed for removal. There is support for the 1.5 foot wide rail as opposed to the 2.5 foot wide rail. Remove the abandoned storm drain pipe. Provide drawings showing what the bridge will look like, including existing and proposed. It was suggested that an overlay of the proposed plan over an aerial view image be included. On the plans, show the shade and shadow provided by the proposed trees. Study adding a way for wildlife to traverse north-south below the bridge and fencing. Provide aerial photos showing the parking alignment of cars. Bridge railing option A may be appropriate. Study reducing the width of the sidewalks along north of Mason and east of Kimberly Avenue. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to reiterate the context of the project, and I think that most of you, if not all of you, do understand that over a broader picture, which is that we're implementing a project that was approved in the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project with an approved EIRAS and coastal development permit. So although it may seem at times that the project isn't making significant progress, I'd like to reiterate some of the progress that we have made in the last several months. The bridge width had been originally proposed as the full curb-to-curb width of the full street width, and that has been reduced. The south side of the bridge has been reduced by 6 feet, and now we are at a 36-foot width, and that staff has made a commitment to continue to work with the approving authorizing agencies, namely Caltrans and the federal government, FHWA, and within our own staff, to strive to have the bridge be as narrow as can be approved, and we've made a commitment to do that. So I want to make you aware of that. Our most recent analysis of that has reflected that 36 is that we're very confident that 36 will be approved by Caltrans and FHWA, and we're pushing the envelope to see how much less can be approved, and we would continue to do that throughout the design process. We are in the preliminary design process at present, and we'd like to get an approval today so that we would be moving into the final design process, which takes a significant amount of effort, and that includes a $400,000 to $500,000 consultant contract to further study all the details and analysis. So some of the motion from the January 18th, some of that will become part of the next step in the design process, which is final design. At preliminary design, we try and get you enough information to get us to this next step of entering into a contract with the design consulting engineer. And so with that, I would like to tell you more of the progress that we've made. We've been to the Creeks Committee recently on February 15th, and they have provided their information, and we'll hear from them and their comments, many of which are coincide with the HLC comments. Again, paramount to this approval today would be the bridge alignment and the geometry. And I say now general geometry because when we talk about the bridge width and how narrow can it be, we're striving for the narrowest that will be approved so that this project can be funded by the federal government. And they, again, are funding approximately 99% of this, which is a little more than they typically do at the 88.5% level. So with that, I'd like to get into the project design elements that the HLC has commented on and a response to that. So if we could flip to sheet 3, where we talk about the alignment. And you recall that we had talked about the western alignment being paramount as it is the anchor or the geometrical alignment as the starting point for the bridge. In the EIR-EIS that was approved, there was the anticipated realignment of Kimberly as the bridge has to go from approximately 35 feet to 55 feet in width, and we call that now the span of the creek, and this being the width of Kimberly, just for nomenclature. And so what we've made an improvement on is to reduce this former 12-foot sidewalk to a 6-foot sidewalk and given that area to the habitat expansion zone. And we've been working with Creek staff and the Creeks Committee on making this habitat expansion zone a primary focus point of this project in which that we can get it to be optimum such that the vegetation and the animals that would benefit from this space. It does have a wall around it, because there is significant grade difference between the road and the creek and this adjacent property in the creek, so it will have a wall around it. And similarly, there'll be a necessity for a wall on this side as well. And we'll talk about that in another minute when we talk about this vegetated area here. This habitat expansion zone was a requirement as approved by the EIR-EIS. And so one of the common goals, I believe, of all the boards and commissions and the staff is to embellish this area to its maximum potential for the benefit of this area and its intended use. And so with that, we have also come from a design that had the parkway shown adjacent to the curb. And what we did was that we have moved the parkway that was adjacent to the curb and added it to the area that was on the creek side of Kimberly Street. So we've added green space or area or landscaping space to this in an attempt to maximize this area. But this area is not what's defined as the habitat expansion zone. It's not shown on the plan that that we've seen before, the EIR-EIS, this version right here. The habitat expansion zone that is required is here. There's another habitat expansion zone required, which will be part of another phase of the project. Our project is generally in this vicinity, and the area I'm referring to as the landscaped area is this vicinity here, which wasn't identified as the habitat expansion zone. So the proximity of this habitat expansion zone, which will be in a future phase, is generally in this vicinity right here. In this vicinity. So when we talk about some of the design elements that we will likely talk about, one of the engineering and the Creeks staff concerns would be to maximize this future habitat expansion zone, similar to what we have done immediately south of the bridge, so that we can have a maximum benefit of habitat expansion zone. And this area here is partly temporary and partly a narrow strip of land that is trying to get its maximum use as well. So I just want to try and keep that in perspective there. Okay. So moving on with those geometric, and that's the primary focus today, is that the geometry of the bridge is paramount. Another comment, which was the habitat expansion zone should include and complement the Tidewater Goby, and staff wholeheartedly agrees with that, and that the final design or the initial phase of the final design will need to address that specifically, and that the rocks and even the bridge features in the creek at the bridge will have elements that would enhance and not preclude the Tidewater Goby habitat. So that is an important element of the design that we have been made aware of and would be striving to fulfill. I'll defer the landscape architect comments. I'll try and work through some of the engineering comments and then defer to David Black on the landscape architect comments. So going down the list, the bridge rail, of course, is the narrower bridge rail we support, and we're getting a good response on that. The next item number that's on my list here is the storm drain manhole and the outlet and its proximity and how it impacts the design. So I believe that we can go to the new sections on the plans, which I believe is the next sheet. I'd like to walk you through the new sections that were developed in response to the HLC request to...
These aren't the sections. Sections?
I'm sorry, not sections, but the...
Okay.
Elevation.
Let's talk the elevations first, because it sets it up for the sections. So the elevations, show that if you were in a canoe or something in the creek and you were going downstream, these are the views that you would see to the east and to the west. And so let's start at the downstream where the habitat expansion zone starts. So you see that there is a wall again at the back of the, and that would be at the property line at the west end of the 15 West Mason Street property line. And a wall is necessary for the grade difference. At the top of the wall is the grade of the existing lot that remains, that isn't part of this project. And so there's a wall and a sloped embankment to meet the desires of achieving a successful habitat expansion zone. I can just quickly refer to that here in section 4 that has the wall, the sloped area that's being desired, and an emergent wetland that transforms to the creek so that that vegetation would thrive and that the animals would be able to traverse in through a successful habitat expansion zone. And so we've worked with Creek staff and with the Creeks Committee to, that's seen as a desirable, I hope optimum use of that limited space of property. Okay, so moving down, and then there is a wall that's necessary adjacent here so that because of it has to support the road. Similarly, a wall is necessary upstream of the bridge because there's approximately 14-foot grade difference between the corner of Kimberly and the bank. So a wall is necessary, but we've been recently working and talking with Creek staff as to exactly where that wall would be. And so it's necessary to be here in this elevation, and we've shown the wall nearest the creek, but that wall we could, in our initial stages of the final design, be looked at as to where the wall can be potentially moved. And let me show you that on a plan view. We've currently shown the wall here adjacent to the creek. It is necessary to have a wall between the creek and the road to hold up the road, but if this wall could potentially move over like this, then we can actually have more sloped area adjacent to the creek, and the wall could potentially be moved over there. So we're willing to entertain those types of comments from you so that we could pursue that in the next phases of the design. and we would like to come back to the HLC in the initial stages of the final design to work out some of those design details that really need some time and effort and coordination with Creek staff and Creek's committee so that we can bring forth to you some of the best recommendations. At present, we had it designed there for various reasons, and one of the factors is the manhole. And so our preliminary design information for the manhole showed that there is a 54-inch storm drain pipe that exists approximately right here that we need, and one of the comments here is to abandon the 54-inch. The 54-inch currently outlets here on the south side of the bridge, south of the bridge. We would abandon that line up to a point where a manhole is necessary, and it will end up in this vicinity between here and here. We've shown it here at present because that's where our preliminary design has shown it to be optimally located. And again, we didn't want to preclude, if the manhole was here, we would need to do more investigation to see how a manhole here and an outlet in this vicinity would not negatively impact the future habitat expansion zone upstream in the next phase. So we are receptive to moving the walls where it makes sense and the manhole where it makes sense, but it takes more time, effort, design, and working through the design parameters to do that, which we would propose to do in the initial phases of the final design. Okay, that said, moving back through the project, we do achieve, I believe, what is being desired at this end of the project, which is another sloped area without a wall. And we achieve that in this vicinity of the project here. And that is what we get. So what is up for further analysis and investigation would be as to exactly where that manhole would be best situated, because there's a 54-inch pipe leading to that manhole that needs to have cover on it, and the outlet of that manhole, where it is it best situated, and how does that impact the future habitat expansion zone, which is immediately upstream of our project ending point. Some more detail. On the west side of the creek, then we're looking at vertical walls as the EIREIS. Again, that goes back to the alignment of the western alignment of the abutment of the project. And so that is the limits of the project as was approved in the EIREIS. And so that, again, is that foundation point. And we talked about the tree. I'm hoping that we can talk more about the tree, but I hope that we've got some consensus or some direction that we can move forward with the alignment as proposed. So interested in hearing more comments about that. Bridge width. So the current bridge width as proposed is 36 feet of curb to curb, which would correspond to the future 36-foot width of Mason. It currently is 38, 39 feet on both sides. We do need a design exception from Caltrans and from the federal government to get from those existing conditions to the new conditions, and we've made a commitment to make that as narrow as we can get it approved by Caltrans and by the FHWA and by the city's process, because we have site distance requirements and safety and turning movements that have to be factored into in this Kimberly intersection design. Let me see. Sidewalks. We were asked to look at the sidewalks. Let's start with Kimberly Avenue. It's Kimberly. The 9-foot that is proposed here on the west side of Kimberly, that is being recommended because the rest of Kimberly north of this area is an existing 9-foot sidewalk to the Indigo Hotel. The sidewalk stops 3/4 of the way down the block. So there's existing sidewalk 3/4 of the way down the Kimberly to this throughout, and it has 6-foot sidewalk and 3-foot tree wells, or actually 9-foot sidewalk with 3-foot tree wells, better said. So we were planning on it being consistent. If the HLC would prefer this to be narrower for whatever purpose, it would eliminate the tree wells. So the reason for the 9 feet is to make it consistent with what exists on the street today. So we're receptive to hearing comments on that. Across the street, we have sidewalk that exists in this vicinity right here from this point north all the way down Kimberly and around Unanoli. So it is a link of, or a stretch of sidewalk, which is what is deemed as has a missing link. This is a gap between the existing sidewalk here, the existing sidewalk on Mason, and so there's been some suggestion by the Creeks Committee, or a recommendation by the Creeks Committee, to not include this sidewalk in this project and to have more green space to the curb of the road. One of the pedestrian master plan goals is to connect the dots, or to have the links connect so that sidewalk connectivity is accomplished. And so that is the reason why the sidewalk is here. And again, we would typically have Parkway as is on the existing immediate adjacent portion, and that we would we have added that to the vegetated area for an embellishment of the what can be done for the creek environment. So that's a stickler point where we've got conflicting issues between guidelines, internal guidelines. And then the issue of the width of the sidewalks on the bridge. So we currently have 5.5-foot sidewalks on the existing western portion of Kimberly, and there would need to be a slight transition here before the bridge. We've talked with Caltrans. We believe that we can get the design exemption for that transition from the 39 feet to the 36 feet or less, if they can approve it. And then the reason for the 8-foot sidewalk and the 6-foot sidewalk, the 8-foot and this angle is due to the sight distance requirement for the turning movement and the sight distance for this maneuver. It's actually this left turn for traffic coming this way for the person in the vehicle to see it. So, and this curb extension aligns up for traffic movements, and that is the recommendation of the traffic engineer, which we support. The south side is that we've been asked to minimize the bridge and from the 12 feet now to the 6 feet. This is 5.5 and this is 6, but the current standard or the design guidelines are for 6-foot minimums. So we can talk about that too. But again, whatever we can gain in bridge, or for whatever we can minimize in bridge width, we can gain a few square feet, well, several square feet. This is about 42 feet in length. So for every foot that we gain in bridge, we get 42 feet more of habitat expansion zones. So with that 6-foot movement here, we were able to get 240 square feet, 240 plus square feet, which was substantial. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to David to talk about some of the other design elements that we were tasked to bring back to the commission. Sure.
I don't need that.
Okay, good.
I'm David Black, the landscape architect for the project. I just want to be brief because I think John's been pretty complete in terms of a description, and you've seen the drawings. But I did want to point out, as you saw in our last meeting in January, I think it's the intent of the project, and it's been made clear that the existing 5-trunk sycamore would in fact be removed as part of this construction. And I will point out that we would be replacing that tree with a total of what's shown here, 12 new sycamore trees on site. Now, we've had discussions with the Romasantas on the adjacent Harbor View Inn property, and Mark's here in the audience now. And we've identified some locations where these 5, if you will, sycamores could be located on the Harbor View Inn property, and then in addition to the expanded habitat areas where we're showing new sycamores as well. Now, I didn't personally feel it was necessary to show a shadow study. I think it's pretty clear that that the trees as they're located will provide shadowing. We're somewhat limited by the locations of the trees in terms of on private property. The city will, in fact, as I think was pointed out in the last meeting, will own this property, this house, and it will be preserved and sold later. But we have an opportunity to remove 2 specimen Phoenix Canariensis palms here, and we could put in their place some additional sycamores. Now, there was a comment, and I'll make this brief. There was a comment at the last meeting about getting the largest specimen sycamores that we could get. I think we're directed and by the environmental report, but also it's been consistent with projects up and down the creek that all the native plant material be genetically pure and consistent with the palette and native palette that exists up and down the creek. So that being said, the other two bridge projects that we've been involved with at Haley de la Vina and Ortega, all the sycamores and plant material have been contract grown. And now we can, and I know the city has already been talking to Growing Solutions, and we can propagate cuttings from the existing sycamore and over a period of 3 years between now and the anticipated time of installation, they would be grown up. But I will point out, and I just talked to them this morning, that they probably won't be more than 15-gallon to 24-inch box size, and some 6 feet tall. And that's essentially what's gone on at the other bridge projects. So I point that out. Now, if the commission wants to vary that approach, then I guess that's a subject for discussion. Or maybe the trees that are planted on private property could be larger specimens, not genetically consistent with the rest. And then on the basically the city project portions of the habitat area, they would be the ones that we would propagate. It's interesting, when I spoke with Growing Solutions today, they said one of the problems with sycamores these days is many of the ones that you get in nurseries are actually hybrids of the California sycamore, the racemosa, and the London plane tree. So they're not genetically pure. So obviously there's a real advantage to being able to take cuttings from this tree and use them on this project. So I just point that out. I think John's pointed out, there's some discussion about what the east and west elevations, longitudinal elevations, if you will, or the elevations of the creek walls will look like, and this points out, here's the section of the bridge, as you can see. I think I pointed out, in fact, I know we did at the last meeting, that we're committed to having pedestrian railings on the tops of these creek walls, not unlike what was done in the lower 1A reach down near State Street. This is essentially the design for that railing. And as you know, this reach extends from State Street up to the pedestrian bridge at the Harbor View Inn, and it's anticipated that this same look, albeit probably better executed technically, would be used from that pedestrian bridge up to Mason Street. Now, what we're proposing beyond Mason Street, upstream of it, is perhaps another construction technique that is yet to be identified, but something that is, I think, more acceptable to the commission than perhaps the way this shotcrete approach worked out. And then what I proposed the last time was the railing that would be used on the upstream side. I think it becomes a nice transition to go with the railing that's already been approved for the Chiprala Street Bridge, which is obviously just upstream. So the intent then would be to have this design from State Street up to the Mason Street Bridge, and then this pipe, basically this pipe design is sort of an ode to the pipe railing up near the railroad depot. Yeah, exactly. So that would be sort of the intent, and the bridge serves as a really nice transition, if you will, between the two designs, and that's what intent. And remembering that both of these designs have already been approved by this body. Okay. And then the last item is the actual bridge railing itself. We showed you this particular concept, and it seemed to be from what I gathered from the comments, was identified as the preferred. Essentially a modified version of the Ortega Street Bridge railing, and I think it's been pointed out that the railing would only be 18 inches in width, if you will. But it would have, the difference being between this and the Ortega was it would have these arched openings, essentially. And I think the rest of the drawings speaks for themselves, and I'm here to entertain any questions you may have.
Okay, I will open public comment.
Mr. Chair, just one real quick thing, which is that the city staff has initiated a Lower Mission Creek tree mitigation effort as well, which this is just a component of. And so we will be adding trees up and down the Lower Mission Creek corridor as a city project and utilizing the city-acquired properties as opportunities to plant more sycamore trees on the corridor. So, for example, 306, 309, Ortega were acquired for the Ortega Bridge project. Before we sell them, we want to be able to put those trees on those sites too, and then have some restrictions for the future property owners so that those would thrive. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open public comment then, and we received a memorandum from the Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Program Citizens Advisory Committee, and I believe you've all had a chance to read that. I don't think I need to go through that. Okay. Then the first member of the public to speak is Lee Moldiva, followed by Mark Romasanto. Mr. Moldiva has requested 4 minutes to present 4 key points. So your time starts now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the HLC, I'm Lee Moldiva, representing the Creeks and Watershed Advisory Committee. We have 4 key points we'd like to share with you. Point number 1, we believe, having attempted to research federal and Caltrans and city zoning code guidelines, that the Mason Street Bridge could be as narrow as 28 to 30 feet. And if you were going to give a conceptual approval today to Public Works, why not approve at the level that would be most congruent with the West Beach neighborhood that we're trying to protect in transition? And if it turns out as they go from conceptual to final that there's some requirement on the federal that we haven't been able to research, that can be added in later with an explanation from the feds. Number 2, we would really like to support what Mr. Owasiak said about trying to move the wall and the sidewalk on Kimberly as far towards State Street as possible, with the idea that this is going to be the only section of Lower Mission Creek after the flood control and the Army Corps are done that is going to have any chance for natural banks and natural water flow at all. All the others are either going to be 2 walls or channelized. So we have that exhibit, which is a continuation of our previous conversation. The item on the right, which is the preferred technique by flood control and Army Corps, would be vertical walls on both sides. The one on the left is a natural creek, which is ideal. If we're able to get 10 feet of Kimberly moved closer to State Street by eliminating the sidewalk on the edge of the creek and making the one in front of the proposed new hotel a little bit narrower at the expense of the tree well, we could put that support wall underneath the edge of Kimberly itself, and it would allow a 5-foot slope, which is shown second from the left as our preferred alternative. It would allow a safe, legal Kimberly. It would allow a safe, secure bridge. In terms of part of the idea for making the bridge narrower, we would like, with all due respect to our friends in Public Works, to go back to the concept that the line of sight is an issue only because the proposal is for Kimberly as a 2-way street. And if it becomes a 1-way street going towards the freeway right past the entrance of the new hotel, then the extra wide sidewalk on the Mason Street Bridge for line of sight and the special railing for line of sight becomes unnecessary because there will be no traffic conflict in that direction at all. But the street width would still be legal and the bridge width would still be legal, and we get maximum benefit to the creek and to the habitat.
Mr. Moldiva, you're at 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And then finally, we're very grateful for Public Works input on this. We believe that the existing drain can be abandoned much further up from the bridge than the current staff proposal indicates, and we think that it could come out at approximately a 5-foot level and still be functioning, safe, and effective. and that would create a lot more habitat and a lot healthier creek above the bridge as well as underneath the bridge and below the bridge. So our 4 key points are Mason Street Bridge, as narrow as possible in our minds, is 28 to 30 feet, and it would still qualify in the 5 to 6 range for federal and state approval. Kimberly has the potential as a one-way street that would eliminate the need for the wider bridge and have safer vehicle and pedestrian movements. Trying to go with the wall on Kimberly underneath the edge of the street rather than at the creek bank will allow a partial sloping creek bank, which is about as good as we could get here, and abandoning the drain 150 feet further up would not in any way diminish the project and would create a lot of new habitat in a healthy creek area. So those are our 4 key points. I'll answer any questions if I can.
Perfect. Any questions? Commissioner Drury?
Minute to ask.
Yeah.
May I call you Lee?
Absolutely.
How would the in the best case scenario, how would that bank be stabilized? Would it be underwritten with gabions?
Well, as you can see here on the left, that's a schematic for a natural creek, with the sloping bank towards the bottom.
So it would be the natural angle of repose for that type of soil.
Now, as John and Public Works have pointed out, by the nature of the project, the other side of the creek is going to have to be a wall anyway.
Okay.
So this whole conversation is, can we get one side of the creek as close to a semi-natural bank that could entertain a wide diversity of plants and animals that the birds and the fish could interact with? And David, it's a superior proposal, but you have to understand that doing planting at the top of a setback wall that's 10 or 12 feet high aesthetically is going to be very pleasing as you approach the bridge of Kimberly. But in terms of the ecosystem of the creek, there's going to be almost no interaction at all.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Moldiva.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Romasanta. Followed by Eddie Harris. So if you please get ready, Mr. Harris.
Hello, I'm Mark Romasanta, representing Romasanta Family Trust. I've watched the project evolve over the last year or so with John. I think his latest proposal is a lot of hard work and a lot of good input. I also proposed or thought about a one-way street, thought about no street at Kimberly. I was told by numerous people in the city that it will retain a two-way street. If there is a way to make it one-way, I think John has tried to find that way. I don't think he has a personal preference as one or two-way. I was told by many people in the city it needs to stay a two-way street for future development, for traffic, etc. So if it needs to stay a two-way street, I think he's done a good job narrowing as much as possible. As I said before, I'm happy to work with the city to try and get sycamore trees on our property. There are some constraints, but I think most of the sycamores they show can work on our property. The sycamore trees that we have planted in the past grow very fast down in that area. So whether they're planted at 6 feet today, 8 feet, or 10 feet in 2 or 3 years isn't going to make any difference. In a matter of 2, 3, 4 years, those trees will provide shade as they do now. Again, I support the project. I hope we can move it along. I think Creeks has good input, but sometimes you have to mitigate things as best you can, and not everybody gets what they want. We're not getting exactly what we want. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Romasanto. Mr. Harris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the HLC. I'm Eddie Harris, and I'm speaking for the Santa Barbara Urban Creeks Council. And I want to talk a little bit about the public expectations. Based on the extensive environmental review that was done for the Lower Mission Creek flood control project, the public has expectations that the work done in Lower Mission Creek for that purpose will serve to benefit the natural environment. Those expectations remain, as does the obligation of the city to ensure that the protections and creekside amenities that were promised become reality. I believe that the HLC process is informed by the environmental documents that were prepared by the flood control project And in those documents, the importance of native vegetation, slope banks, and adequate natural shade are emphasized, as is the city's commitment to making sure that those elements are maximized throughout all reaches of Lower Mission Creek. And I want to say that I very much do appreciate the Historic Landmarks Commission's willingness to consider Urban Creeks Council's input about important design elements that will facilitate recovery of the degraded conditions that exist there now. This project, as part of a larger creek project, must conform to the overall plan and vision. It must embody the intent to allow functionality to return to Santa Barbara's most important creek, the artery that links the city to the shoreline. This reach of the creek, the estuary, is the keystone to health on our shoreline for fish, birds, animals, and people. And so we ask you to please find a way to further narrow Kimberly Avenue and realign it away from the creek. As Mr. Moldiva has suggested, I think a one-way road there works very well for that purpose. Allow sufficient space for a slope bank and for riparian vegetation, and minimize the use of vertical concrete walls. Please further minimize the width of the proposed bridge to allow for increased riparian habitat. If necessary, an exemption to the state requirements may be obtained. And please replace the proposed vertical concrete wall on the upstream side of the bridge near Kimberly Avenue with a slope bank. Make sure that there is space designated for native canopy trees. They are essential to provide shade and habitat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. I will close public comment and go to questions from the Commission. Commissioner Winnick, do you have any questions at this point?
Come back to me.
Okay, Commissioner Drury, questions?
No, come back to me, please.
Commissioner Boucher? Perhaps I should have started at the other end of the table.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question.
Commissioner Drury? Yes, question.
One, if you will. When are that 5-trunk sycamore? When is it planned to be? When do you plan to remove such?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Drury, I don't have a definitive time, but we would like to do that sooner than later, and I'm talking within months of having that start. So we'd like to start the propagation of the trees as soon as possible, because we have an opportunity to have those to have growth for 3 years before the scheduled completion date of this bridge, so we can get a head start on the tree growth.
And it doesn't have to be removed in order to propagate it. His question was, when are you planning on removing?
Whatever the arborist would recommend. I don't have a time specific that I am married to.
Okay.
For the design.
I think it would be tied to the start of construction.
Yeah. So satisfy your
the
question.
reason I ask is because I think it needs to be memorialized in paint.
Commissioner Sharp, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Last time you were here, John, we talked about the width of the bridge hinging on federal or state requirements and so forth. And excuse me?
That's a first for you.
And you indicated to us, I believe, that you would look into that. And that's been a month plus. What takes so long to get? This is the heart. The width of that bridge is the heart of almost everything we're talking about here, from the ecosystem to cost, saved by the feds, and it's very important.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Sharp, I'm very pleased that you bring that up, because we have been meeting and talking with Caltrans and the regulatory people for the last month. And as a matter of fact, I even had discussions today to further get the latest information that is available to us. Mr. Moldiva indicated some criteria and mentioned widths of 28 to 30 feet. We have explored that. That's just one of the several items in the equation that needs to be considered for the bridge width that would be approved. One of the criteria does say 28 to 30 feet, but that's only one, and there are other bridge criteria, which there is, I think most of you may know that Caltrans does ratings on bridges, and they rate, every 2 years they do a bridge inspection report, a minimum of 2 years on every bridge that they administer. So it's called a sufficiency rating. So this 28-foot equation, that's one answer, but that's not the end-all answer. There's more to the story. So we have to have a deck geometry rating that is part of a bridge sufficiency rating. These ratings are very important because with these ratings comes what's called...
Okay, Mr. Wozniak, I think that's a sufficient answer.
The shorter answer, is that there's more than one criteria. We have city criteria, we have federal criteria, we have Caltrans criteria, and when you put that all together, we're looking at a potential 34-foot, 2-foot narrowing to what we have now. What was before you is and that's what we're looking for. The general, we won't be able to get to under 30 feet. It's just not going to be able to get approved for federal funding.
Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't see much change in this project since we last reviewed it a month ago, more than a month ago. I'm rather disappointed. I don't think you've adequately addressed the 17 items that we brought up last time. What are you here for? You're here for project design approval?
Correct.
You could have gotten that last time, but you didn't because there were 17 items that we felt needed to be addressed, Mr. Wozniak. You haven't addressed those.
Mr. Chair, respectfully, we've addressed the items that we believe that we need for your decision-making today, and that there is, as I explained earlier, that we would be able to move to the next phase of the project to get to more detail of some of those things that are considered design details that we could come back to with. The bridge width is not a... We were at a loss as to how to get a narrower bridge approved to meet the federal and Caltrans requirements. I'm telling you today that that is between 34 and 36 feet. To get, we're not going to be able to get a federally funded bridge. I don't know of how we can get a federally funded bridge with a bridge width less than that. And so some of those details we have been...
Commissioner Schallenberger, any questions?
I've been thinking about this issue, and I want to bring over this kind of sketch something. I'm going to put it in the form of a question so that
okay.
maybe we can put it together. So I just sketched this out just to help me understand. I first of all, thank you for providing this. This is really helpful to show that not only what you're proposing, but the impact to the area and the historic setting. But if I'm understanding this correctly, we've got face a curb, the wall and back a sidewalk on either side, and then you have essentially a 34 to 36 foot width. I was just going rough numbers here. But you also have this imaginary line that is created by the parking that happens on either side of the bridge. So for vehicle travel, you can't, vehicles wouldn't travel here and then move out of the way of a car. So it doesn't seem to me that the bridge width is dictated by the points you've given here, this 36 foot. It's really dictated by parking on either end here. So I don't understand why we can't do this, this sketched out narrowing that I'm showing here that's treated like bulb outs when there's no impact on vehicle travel. You can't park on the bridge anyway. So who cares whether you have this extra amount of paving on either side when you can't use it anyway? Why not just do this? I don't understand is what I'm saying.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I do have to get into the criteria to explain that. There's several layers of criteria. One of them is a American Society, it's called ASHTO, and I'll get it out here. It's the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's a requirement, a federal requirement, to have the traveled way plus a minimum of 3 feet of shoulder through the bridge. The bridge on the south side, in order to meet that requirement, we've got a 3-foot shoulder and then 11-foot traveled way for the vehicle. So that's a total of 14 feet. On the north side, we have what's governing the width on the north side is the sight distance issue. The sight distance being the turning movements and the requirements for the line of sight with regards to the intersection and the bridge. And that gives a 28.5-foot wide requirement. So the combination of things, it's not one single thing that is triggering the width of the bridge. It's another component is that this approach width, which is being reduced from 39 to 36 feet, which we will be able to get an exemption, I believe we'll be able to get an exemption for, and this 39-foot width, that it gets narrowed down to the 36-foot width, or 34, or whatever we can get approvable, that is another criteria that we simply can't shrink this down. It's not going to be able to be funded by it won't meet the criteria because the approach widths have to be matching on the bridge. And it's just simply, we push that, and we will continue to push that to find an exemption if that's possible. We've just been told that we don't believe that they will be able to get an exemption for that.
That's my point, though, is you use this phrase approach width. I'm saying that on either side of this bridge you have parking that is narrowing the approach width already. It's already not 36 feet. It's 20, about 20.
Mr. Schellenberger, the definition of approach
Yes,
width is
Commissioner Lavoie.
Make a motion for indefinite continuance with the following conditions: that the width of the bridge from wall to wall be no wider than 30 feet, that Kimberly be redesigned as a one-way street, that the sidewalk on the west side be removed, that the sidewalk on the right side be removed, or not removed, but minimized, and a 9-foot width seems excessive for a street that is basically an alley, to shorten the drain line, and to initiate at present time the propagation of the sycamore that's to be removed, and to the extent possible that the side of the creek adjacent to Kimberly Drive be a sloped surface. That is based on being able to, at some future date, make compliance requirements for neighborhood character.
Compatibility requirements. Okay. Okay, we have a motion made by Lavoie, a second, and under discussion, Commissioner Urbias. Microphone, please.
I was patiently waiting to say something, and I have not had a chance to say it, and I would like to make a couple of comments. I have concerns because when the flood comes down, and we do get floods, when it comes down, the area that you have designated for the habitat location, what are the size of the boulders, and how can you protect that area from being washed out during the floods? Can you put in fairly large boulders which will protect these? Because otherwise this whole thing could go. Are you planning on doing that?
My understanding, yes, is that the boulders would be sufficiently sized so that to withstand some major storm events.
And could you identify what some major storm event would be?
Well, the bridge, the conveyance for this is a 20-year storm event. So it'll be designed for a 20-year storm event. Anything beyond a 20-year storm event, it will break out upstream of this location.
I understand that. But you are moving to protect this area.
That's correct.
Then that should be also a condition that is included in any motion, because this becomes one of their major mitigation measures for movement of things, and if that's not protected and stated.
I don't think the Commission adequately appreciates the fact that we have one of the top design engineers, Bengal Engineering, working on this project, and, I don't think they're going to prepare a set of drawings that would not address those issues. So I think that goes without saying.
Okay, is the maker of the motion willing to add that
I hate to tell you this, but as a scientist, I like to see things written down and
All right,
covered very
that's
carefully.
enough discussion. We have a motion on the floor.
Mr.
I'm asking.
Yes, please add an item to that the stability of the slope be
Below
continued to be considered as critical to the design.
Okay, we had a motion by Lavoie.
Mr. Chair, I need to comment before you vote.
All right.
The first two items, there is some concern about how you word those. The first item has to do with the engineering width of the bridge, and I like the fact that Mr. Lavoie worded it that it should. However, I think the last time we asked for evidence from Caltrans or the state that said there was no design exception to be granted, if you continue to insist on there being a design that our city engineer is saying is likely not to be approved, I think that and the issue of the one-way street is a council decision. council decides whether there should be one-way streets, not this commission. So we should word it such that you direct your comments to the Public Works Engineer or council as to what you'd like to see.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Lamone, would you prefer a motion for denial?
No, what I'm suggesting is that your second your item reads, Kimberly redesigned as a one-way street. No, that's not.
How about the commission would prefer that Kimberly Avenue be a one-way street?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, I think
strongly prefers.
And then that way, Mr. Iwazi can
For
pursue.
the reasons that were stated.
And it may take council's directive to say that's not going
All
to
right.
happen.
So we have a motion and a second. A motion was Lavoie, second by Boucher. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No oppositions, one abstention. Schallenberger. Motion carries. Suding is stepping down on the next item, item number 3. Mr. Sharp will take over. Item number 3 is 1722 State Street.
Did you mark on these at all?
No.
No?
Oh, just the one,
I'm just going to keep this,
just the one aerial.
Since that's what was shown. If you need a set, you can take one of those or over here.
I don't need a set. Oh, I'll just take these.
Is that one in here? David? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
How you doing?
Good. Good.
Want these?
Yeah, sure.
You want to sit here? John told me to sit there. Why don't you sit there?
Oh, it is. Gee. Hi.
Hello.
How are you, Jan?
I'm okay.
Good.
Hanging in there on the roller coaster ride. This is life.
If it wasn't that way, you'd be bored.
That's true.
So, Jan, this got revised, I guess?
Yes.
Here, let me put my...
I've got a great copy of that.
Okay.
If you like tiles.
This is the planning commission resolution. They approved PC approved the project with the following revisions so that's for you guys. And it
Oh, we should have your latest.
actually it's probably a little better to read it this way. This is all this. This is the resolution. This was the minutes.
Right.
This is this spelled out. So it's probably
This actually ended up in the set.
So it starts here and it goes the next page.
You get a smaller set?
Yeah. You want all that red?
Well, that's what HLC needs to consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want any of this materials?
I need you back, Phil. This is too difficult. Okay, this is item number 3, 1722 State Street. Would the applicants please state your name for the record?
Okay, I'm Jan Hockhauser. This is Jay Blatter, and this is Carl Benker. We're working with Hockhauser Blatter Architecture and Planning.
And who's the guy on the far right?
Phil Suding Design Landscape
Okay,
Architects.
I think staff has some comments.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Sharp. I'm Kelly Rodison, Assistant Planner. This project went to Planning Commission on December 1st, 2011, and the Planning Commission was happy with the architecture. They made some comments. They wanted the applicant to designate 2 parking spaces specifically for patient pickup and drop-off and delivery vans near the rear entrance of the building. they were concerned about patient circulation. They also wanted the applicant to maximize street landscaping opportunities within the potential parkway zone without precluding pedestrian access from parked vehicles. And they also wanted the applicant to maximize areas on the roof for photovoltaic opportunities without the preclusion of the required mechanical equipment. So as I stated, this project was approved on December 1st, and the applicant is back today, post-PC, to request project design approval and, if possible, final approval. So at your behest, you can go ahead and review the project and do as you please.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, give another shot.
Ms. Gantz has asked me to read to you the conditions of approval from the Planning Commission, and they're quite lengthy, so, but she feels they should be read for the record and to... No. I'm not going to talk about relocation of public facilities. This is all design review. The project, including public improvements, is subject to the review and approval of the HLC. HLC shall not grant project design approval until the following PC land use conditions have been satisfied. 1, tree removal and replacement. All trees removed except fruit trees and street trees approved for removal without replacement by the Parks Department shall be replaced on site on a 1-to-1 basis with minimum 24-inch box size or 15-gallon size trees, size to be determined by...
I'm sorry, Chair Sharp, just to save you time.
Thank you.
The first part of the conditions are regarding tree protection, and there is only a couple trees at the front, so I don't think, if you don't want to, you don't have to read all of the conditions, but they are regarding tree protection of the trees in the front, and then landscape screening, which I already talked about, screened backflow device, which is a common condition that you often see, trash enclosure provisions, and then the 2 parking spaces, which I also mentioned, and then the photovoltaic. So I already mentioned the 3 that
Yep.
we need to talk about.
You did. Thank you. Okay, would you tell us about the project that got a PC approval, please?
Okay, well, we're back before you to kind of pick up where we left off, to show you the project refinements that were asked for, to show how the conditions that the Planning Commission set forth were met, and just to update everybody on this commission as to the status of the project.
Thank you.
Is it easier if I have 2 identical sets? One's a half size, and this is a full size. Use the full size. So if we turn to the 5th page, TN2, and then beyond that to A1.1. This is the...
Wait until everybody gets there.
Okay.
Okay, go.
The current project site plan that illustrates the access from State Street, the pedestrian access points on both sides of the building.
You're going to have to speak into the mic also.
There we go. So the site plan here off of State Street is illustrating the project pedestrian access points to both sides of the building and the main entry plaza lobby at the center front of the building. From the parking lot in the rear, at the rear lobby entry, this access point was provided with the deletion of a parking spot, so there's drop-off. In addition to the required ADA parking, there's some patient drop-off parking located here. We have a handicap ramp, stairway to the 2nd floor. So the project has universal access. When we get into the landscaping, I'll actually have Philip describe how the various elements are screened per the conditions of approval. And I'll come back to the details, but I wanted to first go to the project elevations on A3.1.
A3.1.
And some revisions to the fenestration, the addition of some fenestration, and Commissioner Sharp, you had asked for the address of fenestration at the rear of the building against the retaining wall in the rear alley of the building. And then this is the north elevation. All of this is significantly screened by vegetation, which again will get into the landscape features. Now, the next drawing illustrates the specific detailing of the interior elevations and the articulation of the lobby spaces. This is the State Street lobby that shows the coffered ceilings on both levels.
This is interior only.
Well, this is actually exterior to the street. This is kind of an outdoor plaza lobby space, and I know the Commission said that should be appropriately treated. So what we've endeavored on our advanced work here is to show the tiling patterns, the coloration, the articulation of the ceilings, all to be consistent with the guidelines. So you've got this series of drawings here, the two sides and the back wall of the State Street Plaza lobby, and then down here is the rear off the parking lot lobby. This, of course, looking into it. The elevators on both floors here, the types of sconces and fixtures, the heavy beam work at the roof, which we've got all the colors and detailed tile patterns for. So if we come back down, if we could flip back to the back front of the set, these are just the tile patterns that occur on the rear lobby. This is A1.3, or this is the upper lobby, the staircase up, the outdoor lobby that's covered by the tile roof with the entries into the interior spaces. And on the lower level, off the parking lot, here's this small stair down, the ramp, handicap ramp access down, and the rear lobby with elevator access on both levels. And we've got a palette to show you of terracotta and the gold and black tile work. And then on the State Street lobby, we're showing the pattern work of terracotta tile work with some, at this location, some detailed tile work to bring in some Moorish motifs into the plaza elevation. This happens to be a detail elevation of the staircase and the tile patterns there, and some more detail on those specific tile patterns. And then I could walk you through the set. These are generic details. We've detailed a plaster timber, stained timber trash enclosure per the guidelines. And we've got the stained colors on the woodwork for the gates. These are demo plans of portions of the existing structure, showing what's raised and what's maintained. And these are first floor plan, showing 1, 2, 3 suites. And up second floor plan, again showing 1, 2, 3 suites. And this exhibit's important because this shows the solar panel locations per the Planning Commission requirements, screened locations behind the parapets for mechanicals.
Parapets are higher than the
Absolutely.
Equipment.
Mm-hmm. And of course the elevations which I referred to. And these are again the exterior elevations of those outdoor lobbies. The arch was slightly modified just to adjust proportions ever so slightly, with some details showing the actual thickness of the archway into the lobby. Picking up on the traditional detail, there's a nice panel inside here which has a color in it, and then the Moorish tile work, which we have samples of for you to see. And then your typical wall sections that show the screening height of the parapet walls, in the typical cornice around the building. The blank sheet. And then there's just some blow-up detail, which you've already seen, but this is as a bigger scale. This is the rear lobby. This is the outdoor portion of the lobby, the entry into the interior spaces. But you can see the handrail details, all the sconces, the elevator access doors. And we're excited to show you the colors. We think the colors are add a nice embellishment to the building. And then, of course, a section from State Street into the exterior lobby here. And then, of course, a side elevation, opposite view, showing the staircase up. And the upper level, there's a bench on the second level. In fact, I'd like to call the Commission's attention to that. If I might go back to A2.1 would be good.
It's probably further. I think it's further here. Probably further back.
Well, I think this, I can use this drawing down. This one.
Well, I'm here, so.
Okay. So this is the ground level. So when this stair takes you upstairs, on the second level, you come up to this upper level mezzanine lobby, and there's a nice bench, tile bench here at this end of the lobby, and that's shown in that section. So we've got kind of a nice space up here looking out over the arch, and two entryways to the two suites on either side. And then jumping back to that. And, this is our typical window detailing that shows, deep recessed windows. These are dark bronze anodized aluminum with a traditional beveling to the glass. We show in certain cases where we have a cornice over the top of the window. On the front windows on State Street, there's a little decorative tile work around the jamb opening. So all the fenestration is detailed on this page, and I believe it's totally consistent with your expectations. And then this page is important because this begins to show the reflected ceiling plans that show the ceiling plan of the upper lobby. You can show the coffering treatment and the decorative fixtures. And this is a reflective ceiling plan of the thickness of the arch as one moves through the arch. And the upper level coffers on the upper level ceiling, and the heavy timber work and the beam work on the back lobby roof here. And again, just the same drawings at a bigger scale.
We're running short on time here. So
Okay, I'll just weave through. This is just some decorative tile work details. Yeah, I'm going to get to that really quick. But this is heavy timber work, the traditional detailing there, cornice dimensions and details, parapet details, the decorative wrought iron work. And then the landscape plan. Phil, would you care to jump in here and just... Yeah.
Thank you. I got to use it. Irrigation plan. This is the back portion of the property. We needed to cut it in two, so when you get to the planting plan, you understand that this is the back parking lot, and that matches up to there. The backflow preventer will be located in a planting area approximately 18 feet back from the sidewalk, so ample opportunity to screen it there. Moving to the planting plan, there are three existing very large ficus here that will be retained, and that is the approximate canopy or drip line. The Planning Commission wanted us to maximize planting along State Street while still allowing for parked cars to access the sidewalk. So what we've done is we've elongated these planters but left ample sidewalk in between for parked cars. Additionally, if a car does park at the planting area, on the curb here. The plant material there is diamondia, which is walkable. So these are existing queen palms here. Moving back into the project, we are flanking this driveway with magnolias. So we've got 4 magnolias along the front. Between the building and the back of the sidewalk, the Planning Commission also wanted us to beef that landscape up a bit. So I think since you've last seen it, we've added some additional plants, and those plants would be things like Raphiolepis minor and some small bird of paradise, not the giant bird of paradise. Moving back through the parking lot, it's a very simple landscape with mainly ground cover of Diamondia and some Raphiolepis shrubs and bird of paradise shrubs. At one point, the commission also asked us to look at adding trees to the sawtooth planters where available. You can see the canopy of the existing coral tree on the neighboring property. So we've kept out of that canopy and planted one here. Again, we have a canopy of an existing coral tree. And so we planted a Brisbane box there as the tree, and then continued those Brisbane boxes. So the Brisbane box at this elevation is going to help further layer this elevation. Moving back, then again, we've got two more of the Tristanias. Moving around the parking lot, again, same treatment as on this side. There is a big oak here. We're staying out of the canopy of that oak, and we are spacing our trees sort of equally throughout this parking lot while adding to the layering of this side of the building in that elevation. I believe that's it.
Any questions?
Schallenberger.
Elevation 83.1. There is the south elevation, top of the stairs. There's a covered tile roof. And I'm not understanding how that is supported. Are those beams cantilevered, or how?
Yeah, if you look at the reflected ceiling plan, there's a big timber just back behind the face of the building, and all those timbers cantilever off that big timber.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
I've got a few more things, and we'll wrap it up.
I now need to hear from Mr. DeForest. I'm sorry, Judy?
Yeah, we have the color.
I wanted to, before we get into that, have Mr. DeForest come up, and he wishes to speak on the project.
Good afternoon. Kellum DeForest. I commend. I'm very pleased to see that the ficus trees, I'm sort of fond of those ficus trees on the north State Street side of the building. I've been using this ATM for a long time. But I do question why the State Street entrance is so monumental. This is now a surgery center, and the patients are not going to be going through this monumental entrance, I don't think. Are the State Street investors, the financiers of this building, hedging their bets for another usage? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Bring it back to the commission. Let's talk about colors and materials and so forth.
Okay.
Let me go back to the...
Okay, the real quick, not to spend too much time on this. This is the kind of creamy off-white for the basic color of the building, which is typical of a lot of the buildings in the area, and we felt is appropriate for this, not to be too stark in the white selection. This represents the wainscot color on the interior of those exterior lobbies, with accents on the coffered ceilings in these two colors like that. The wrought iron work is the dark black-green color, and then the grill work, the Moorish grill work, is this color here that's set into the frame of that dark color for the wrought iron work. This is the typical dark anodized bronze window color. The decorative tile work on the wall remains in these three colors, like that. typical paving palette, and pavers your typical terracotta tile work with accent tile work in these colors to kind of keep the theme going, but be just a little bit softer in tonality. And then, of course, the tile roof. These are miniatures of the actual tile roof samples. So that kind of represents the overall palette. It's articulated as to where it goes on our color and materials board, which is required to be submitted by the board. But this is really the complete palette for the building, with, I would say, with this color and the terracotta predominant, and these others being, the accent colors that are used much more sparingly. Yeah, and then this is a typical illustration of the State Street lobby on the ground level and on the upper level, and then this is the rear lobby, State Street over here, coming up the terracotta staircase with the upper lobby tile work and the lower lobby tile work.
Okay, any questions on the colors?
No, I have a question on the drawings.
On the drawings, Mr. Lavoie.
On sheet A 4.0, your wall profiles, I'm assuming that the cornice moldings are an abbreviated representation. They should be referenced then back to a detail that's correct.
That's correct.
Good. That's the only question.
Any other questions? How about comments? All right. Mr. Drury?
I do think that the front lobby is a bit heavy-handed, and that would be my only comment. I think it could be toned down a little bit. Thank you.
Ms. Boucher?
I don't think we have any.
Microphone.
Thank you, Ms.
No comments. Ms. Murray?
I like what's been presented. I think it's going to be good. I like the colors.
All right, Ms. Arias?
I believe at the last meeting, we asked that the front entranceway be changed and beefed up a bit. I think you talked about making it a full-fledged entrance and not something just sort of fox. Do you remember? I'm not sure what the minutes say, but I think what you've done is very nice, and yeah, I like it. I don't personally want to go into it, but but I think it's very nice. I thought we made some comment about the front entranceway being more significant. Yeah, that was my recollection. I could be wrong, though.
Let me read. It's very short. The Commission has had generally positive comments to the architecture. 2, the proposed parking setbacks are supported. 3, the architecture is to be modified to be more in keeping with the EPV design guidelines and Hispanic style. And 4, the architecture is compatible with the EPV guidelines is appropriate for the neighborhood. That was it. There were 2 other motions prior to that failed, and I won't read those, but those were the comments.
I could be wrong in my memory, but that was my recollection.
Okay, Mr. Lavoie?
I'd like to be last, actually.
All right, Mr. Schallenberger.
You're last. Sorry. It's okay. I'm the dissenting opinion on liking the building. I liked the building better when it was simpler. I'm getting a headache thinking of a neoclassical building with Moorish decoration on it. Moorish decoration was exactly what the neoclassical revival was trying to eliminate in architecture. It was a modern movement of the 1700s that sought to strip all the excess sort of stuff off buildings and return it to a more classical purity. Having said that, the applicant had invoked the name of Palladio. I'm not aware of an arch in Palladio's architecture that wasn't at least a full circle. as an absolute minimum, and the proportions of the entry arch bother me for that reason. It's far too horizontal for vertical. And I'd really like to see a Palladian example of an entablature that has a frieze molding that's 3 times any of the moldings. But I am in the minority, so I will not be supporting the project.
Drury? I have a question, so I'm way out of line here. I'm looking at page A31, and I'm looking at the proportions of the entrance, and they don't seem to line up. One pillar is in and the other pillar is out. I'm not sure why that is.
It's shadow.
No. That's not shadow line. That's way over here, and that's way in here. So that's just a drawing. I'm sure that's not the way it's.
It's just.
I mean, this must have been shifted over somehow, because that should be in like that.
Well, I think I'll have something that'll help immensely with that understanding.
Yeah, but that should be. You see, that's right there. Anyway, that's my a question.
Yeah, I think the shadowing might be off, but it's very clear.
Right. I'm okay.
It's
right.
very there it is. Very soon to be on the microphone. Yeah, I'd like to be on the microphone.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, I would like to comment. I mean, a lot of us want to be historians, and
excuse me.
Go ahead, Mr. Drury.
So I'm going to modify my comments earlier, and I will say that I do support the State Street facade, and I like the tile work. I think that's one of the saving graces is the use of color. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Boucher.
it's one thing to look at that. My microphone is on. Thank you, sir. To look at it there, and I have problems with the way it fits in that space, but to look at it here, I just feel, that somebody picked this up in a flea market in Rome and brought it over. A very large flea market.
It was done. Mr. Hurst was notorious for it.
Any other comments regarding, specifically, the entry?
It just seems overpowering for this building.
But, in all deference to the applicant, you people approved this last time and didn't send him away with any other comment.
Okay. You're welcome.
Application today?
Final. Yet. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the project as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
I'm not going to support the motion. Just speaking for myself.
All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries for final approval.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm abstaining.
Boucher, Lavoie, Schallenberger abstains.
Thank
Now, can I just dump all this on your lap? Is
Yeah,
that okay?
I'll roll it up and pull it on the sidewalk. It's like,
Do you have a suitcase with you?
I do have a beautiful book on karate, but I guess
We are trying to keep this moving, so if you could pick it up. It's both.
Wait, I gotta load this up.
It's everything you have here.
Yeah, if you could, we'll need a color copy of this.
Oh,
okay.
It's amazing. It's a long time since I've done
Would you want this way up?
Yeah.
Way up.
Thank you so much. Get out of here.
Our next project is number 4601 Paseo Nuevo. I was looking for you. Didn't know where you were. Here, Susan. That's what you want.
Okay, as Commissioner Sharp indicated, next item is item number 4601, Paseo Nuevo. This is a third concept review for a proposal for an 85 square foot addition and new storefronts on an existing building. Also proposes a new outdoor new outdoor dining patio with planter pot.
It's getting some mileage.
Sorry about that. I didn't have the microphone correct. I didn't have it clipped. What you submitted.
We're on a 2-week continuance.
I think that's somebody else.
That's not ours. That's not our logo.
That's not there.
That's a different Paseo Nuevo.
It's the same Paseo Nuevo. It's a different
project. Okay, if you could state your names for the record and give us a brief presentation. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to read the comments, which are draft minutes. And at this point now, they are memorialized minutes. So the design is acceptable and has progressed from the last presentation. The proposed change from the existing architecture is appreciated. The trellis should be better refined and traditional. What is proposed is too industrial. The light fixture should be more in keeping with other design elements. And study adding the horizontal element back into the door heads, but eliminating the possibility of bird perch. Okay, state your name and presentation, please.
Clay Rowe with AB Design Studio. With me is Joe Reeves from AB Design Studio.
Welcome.
We've already done the colors. I think there's really 2 items here that we're here to discuss, and we're anxious to get into the building department, so hopefully we've brought a couple options and think that maybe we're striking it here. I'll move on to I'll just go right into the elevations.
I think it's basically the trellis and
yeah, so we've looked at the trellis, and we've
bird perch.
We've gotten rid of the bird perch. And we've got 2 options. One which we really prefer, which is actually nothing.
For the trellis?
Yep. In the efforts of keeping things simple, excuse me while I get to the right page.
It was right here.
Yeah, so this is where we had the trellis originally. And as we looked at different ideas and different things, and we felt that there was something nice about the simplicity of just a nice square arch with a door in it and these round arches as it goes around the side of the building. So in the efforts of less is more, our first option that we'd like to present to you is we do nothing. Our second option, actually, I can show you here, was just changing out the awning over the doorway. We have that on an 11 by 17 or something, right? And doing just a new awning in place of the old red awning that was Ruby's kind of brand, and doing something more.
It's really startling. Are you sure it's not too creative?
Well, we're just trying to keep it simple. I actually like it with nothing there. So, but if the commission felt like we needed something there, I don't know. We've kind of gone back and forth. We took out the metal awning for a few reasons. One, our client felt it was turning into something more costly, and we just felt like sometimes the right answer is nothing. Beyond that, I think the only other item that was discussed at the last hearing was lighting. And yes. And what we've looked at is a few different types of fixtures, and I know that it was a comment of trying to keep something a little bit more consistent with the. I gave those away, didn't I? It's okay. With kind of the design, and we were looking at sort of these metal chairs and the rustic tables, and we kind of zeroed in on a couple light fixtures. And we like this one out of this pick, and we have some others if we needed to go more towards the EPV style. But this kind of spoke to us, and our client liked it.
Where do those occur?
And I'll show you. They're mostly for the patio
Okay.
areas. So we took the sacrilegious flowered things off the corner here. And so we were doing a couple at the entry, and then mostly for this is just really low level. They're small. They're just providing a little bit of light throw for evening dining, if you will, along the patio. So we like that fixture. We also had, we also looked at something a little bit more kind of like this from Handelman, which we kind of liked. It has a little modernist flair to it with the square nature and the simple plate.
Next.
A couple of these others I don't really care for. But
So the choice
I
is
was
between
just
this
kind of
and
thinking,
what's on the plan.
yeah, we were
Okay.
thinking that this kind of, I like the kind of, it felt rustic and kind of recycled in a way, kind of what we're trying to do with some of the other elements. So
Okay, I think that's
that was it.
Okay, any questions from the commission? Anyone? How about comments? Okay, Commissioner Winnick.
Sorry, Barry, we took the metal thing. We didn't bring it back. I forgot to mention that.
It's okay. I got that. I'll just comment on the light fixture. I prefer the Handelman one because I like light fixtures that look more timeless.
Yeah,
the other ones
cool.
look to me like they would get dated really quickly.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any differing opinions? Any other comments? Commissioner Schallenberger, comment.
Option 1, no awning. I like that. I like how, just on that note, how protrusions start on the other side of your space, both to the left and to the right in perspective view there. I think that sort of hugs the space nicely. And otherwise, I can support the project as is. I'd go with the Handelman fixture as well. And what software are you using that isn't allowing you to do arches? It's always segmented.
We're actually changing the arch to be segmented. I'm glad you caught. I'm glad you caught. Somebody finally caught that. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boucher.
it doesn't really work, my comment, with this weather we're having. But we do get rain on occasion. Sometimes it's good to have water or something over the door.
Yes, Commissioner Lavoie.
I think I agree with that nothing is better. It's a nice, strong, simple design, and that's what's good about it. And that's why I agree with the square fixture. It's part of that basic simplicity, and that's why it works so much better. I'd make a motion for final approval with, if there are any additional drawings that need to be added to the set, to come back to the consent calendar.
I'll second that. We have a motion for final by Lavoie, a second by Sharp. All in favor?
That would be actually project design approval and final approval.
Okay,
Yeah.
project design
And
approval
what was
and
the-
final.
What was the condition?
It includes the comments that no awning is preferred, and use the square light fixture, and that any other sheets that or details that develop need to come back to consent.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Arias.
Did you have public hearing or not?
No, I did not.
You didn't do public comment.
I will open public comment before taking a vote. Seeing no public, I will close public comment. Thank you, Commissioner Arias. We had a motion by Lavoie and a second by Sharp. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. There you are. You're on your way.
We're just doing our MEP so we can come back and consent and submit as soon as we have it. The Ruby storefront, when Ruby's did their storefront, it's recessed. So you can walk through that.
Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 5, and that is 1224 State Street. This is a proposal for a new ground floor storefront system. Could we have silence, please? Okay. 1224 State Street, the proposal for a new ground floor storefront system with associated 4 square foot addition. Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. We have not seen this before. Okay, your names and brief presentation.
Clay Arell, architect for the project with AB Design Studio, and with me is Eric Baer from my office, and with us is the building owner in the gallery.
Okay, continue.
So this is the 1224 State Street, which is a few doors down from the Granada, next to the Paseo. This is what it looks like today. We're talking about this space is where we're doing the majority of our improvements. However, the building owner owns, this is one parcel, one building, 2 addresses. And we'll get into what we're proposing, but here it is. It's right next to Celadon, and then down this alleyway goes back to the Granada Garage, yeah, and kind of accesses over to Anacapa. This is an interesting photo from the 50s?
Yeah, that's the 60s.
60s? I can tell by the wagon there. Looks like it's 50s. This is what it used to look like back in the day. So it a little bit before my time.
All right, no banter. Okay, continue, please.
So it used to have this pretty large canopy over the front. That's since been removed. It had kind of a butt glazing storefront window here. That was squared off. That got changed at some point in time. And then the windows here are still existing, it looks like, and the windows here have been changed. Right? No, they're metal windows, but they're a little different. And then this piece got removed, and then they did this little railing element and whatnot. So there's some other photos. I'll go to our photo page. I'm sure you all know where we're at. Celadon, here's the project from across the street, here's the Paseo. This trellis was added at some point as an entry for that Paseo. This used to be Coffee Bean here. This is the back of the building from the Granada Garage side. This is the back of 1222, and this is the back of 1224. Yep. Touring Vogue for a while. This is up the street, or down the street a little bit. Or actually, no, that's the old Copelands that got changed a couple years back. Here's a view down the Paseo.
Everybody pretty much have their context?
We know where we're at?
Okay.
We'll keep moving. Basic site plan. The scope of our work, majority of it's interior, but we're also doing some exterior improvements. But the 1224 space kind of does this, and then this is the little ice cream shop, which is in there doing stuff. This is the existing condition of the display window. We're basically proposing to square that off. That's the additional 4 square feet. Is that right? And then we're doing some other improvements on the interior, which really... Oh, sure. Yeah, here's some other photos. We'll just pass these around. Larger scale. Excuse me. Here's the existing elevation, and here's our proposed on the State Street side. We're not really proposing anything on the back side. We kind of like this. A lot of these buildings tend to have these little kind of Juliet well, they're not really accessible, but these little railing details, so we like the idea of maybe continuing that over. We're going for a tile base wainscot underneath the windows, redoing the storefront windows here. We're not sure what tenant's going in here at the moment. And we have some tile samples. Did those get passed around? There's just a couple examples of what could be, as an example, we're looking at a dark, either clad or steel window with a dark, dark paint, and then a nice decorative base tile, kind of in these areas. The other thing that we're talking about doing, which isn't reflected in this drawing, is painting the body of the building here, which would kind of create a little bit more designation between these structures, and we like, the owner likes the idea of maybe some kind of a yellow tone that's maybe a little different than Celadon, but kind of gives a rhythm of different buildings.
These are the bas-relief
Yes.
medallions you're going to be removing. Okay.
The windows are pretty simple. We're doing a transom light over the top, and at the door we were going to do just kind of an embossed steel panel with the address in it, kind of similar to the museum nearby.
Is that pretty much it?
Let's just make sure that the back doesn't have any. That's just showing the elevation. This is the facade elevation, which we're not doing anything other than potentially painting. So.
Okay. So if you're all finished, I will open public comment. And actually, Mr. Meyer, since you are the property owner, you don't need to be part of public comment. But if you want to make comments as part of the presentation, come forward. Yep. No. So I'm going to destroy your public comment slip because you are actually.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. You're actually part of the presentation. You are the owner.
Okay. Hi, Eric Meyer. I used to use this building as one of my offices, but I don't use it anymore. We've moved to San Luis Obispo. I used to be Michael's neighbor. This building is sort of a hodgepodge of architectural style, for lack of a better understanding. I inherited it this way. I bought it this way 20 years ago. And it kind of comes from what I would call originally in the 40s, sort of the Harry's Bar School of Architecture. And then it was remodeled in the 70s and 80s to more of what I would term ball and triangle classical architecture, which is sort of not very good. And it's sort of a hodgepodge. What we're trying to do is get it back to looking something like what the rest of State Street looks like. So I'm in favor of everything these guys are doing, and obviously.
Okay. Thank you. I will open public comment now. Mr. DeForest, you're here to speak.
Yes, Kellum DeForest. I think we need to go back long before Anderson's moved up there. Anderson's was further down State Street near the Granada for years. And I realize that this is facade, or this little section of what we call Arlington, or the Arlington block, has been or as various owners of stores have come in, before we had an EPV, just did what they wanted to in the whim of storefront design. Certainly, let's see, what is his name? Mr. Plunkett, who designed the Arlington, had a vision for this facade of that State Street, or the Arlington side of State Street, be a series of shops, all reflecting the design of the Arlington in the Spanish Revival. So I think it is important that that be returned, and I don't know whether this quite does it, but but it would be interesting to see if there were any very early pictures pre-World War II designed for this storefront
Thank you, Mr.
system.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I will close public comment now, bring it back to the commission. Questions? Commissioner Lavoie, any questions?
Why are you taking up the bas-relief plaster elements?
Why?
Aesthetics or aesthetics?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we were just, yeah. That's a simple answer.
Question, Commissioner Schallenberger?
Question and answer.
Is it the intent to have a different tile base pattern on the windows on either side of the entry door?
Here and here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I just don't see the bottom row tile.
Here.
Okay, just a quick.
It's not the intention to do that.
And are you proposing to modify 1222's facade as well?
Just the upper story windows.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that, but we're changing out the 6 windows up here as well.
And it looks like the engaged pilasters are changing. Is that correct?
Here?
Between the 3 windows?
Oh.
There was a column element. Is that going away?
That might just be a little drawing glitch. It wasn't necessarily intended to do that.
And then just...
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Schallenberger.
Just so I understand all the changes,
the intention was to change out the window, and it looks like we just missed that when we were drawing that. So
that's fine.
Excuse me.
And just so that I understand, the head above the coin there, it looks like that element is a little thinner than what is in the photograph. Here's, this is a better one.
This photograph here.
I don't know.
This element here versus this element here. Right? Is that correct?
Just, are you proposing changing it? I don't think you
no.
look
It's
like
just
you
we're
are from
working
your
off
response.
old drawings. And
Okay.
And those things happen. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Good thing we're here for concept.
I think that was just questions. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Schallenberger. Commissioner Arias, questions? Commissioner Murray?
Yeah. Were you able to find any original plans of this building? Oh,
Maybe
You know, you saw
maybe Eric
some
can help answer that
pictures.
question. He's the one that had those pictures, but
The building was built in the 40s, I think 47.
but you don't have any sort of original
I
plans
do not,
or
no.
anything? Yeah, okay.
Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
One quick question. Everything has mutton bars in the windows, and the existing doors do, and yet you elected not to have them on the part you're changing. Why is that?
Good question. The main reason is the reason why we're doing this process right now is this space has been vacant for 3 or 4 years. And tenants have been coming in and walking it, and everyone just scratches their head and walks out. One of the big issues is that it's very dark in the space, and so we're trying to maximize the storefront ability to bring light in, as well as visibility for some retail tenant that might say, "Hey, great, I got a good store window to deal with." We're specifically not addressing this at all because they're there and operating, and this is empty, but. We felt like the more light we could get through here, the better off the chance of marketing this space for lease. That's been the big issue all the way
Commissioner
through.
Boucher, any questions?
No.
Commissioner Drury, any questions?
Yes, I do. Has there been any research done on these pilasters the plaster accents that are supposed to be or proposed to be removed? Do we know how old they are? Do we know if they're part of the original building?
I don't know where that old photo went. The answer is no. I don't know how old they are. If they were part of the original.
All right, thank you.
Well, that's the old photo showing Anderson's.
There it is.
So does it show up in there? It's pretty hard to tell, but it doesn't look like it.
And that large trellis. I think those were added at some point.
That's a grandson.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Commissioner
gonna bring
Drury,
one like that.
it doesn't really look like they were there in that picture. So that's an indication that that was probably added when they changed and took off that awning there. So those bas
I
relief
think
things
this
are
was as well,
probably
that-
not original.
Anderson just filled out, covered what was there.
Well, you can see in the photograph that it's below the window significantly.
One more
okay.
question.
Commissioner Sharp?
Have you looked for the original drawings in the archives?
I have not.
Okay. Commissioner Winnick?
There's a very good chance they would be there. Very good chance. Which would help us.
That's
No, I'll let him answer.
okay. Is it a response to Commissioner Sharp's question?
Andersons are the people who built the building. They're the people who originally built it. So my assumption would be that the building that you see in those original photos is very close to the original building. That's not a facade that was added to this building.
Taken away.
Yeah, it was taken away to create that classical sort of style that you see with columns.
But even in that photograph, that is post-40s.
Right. But
So-
they are the people that built it. And
Yeah,
it was,
okay. Commissioner Winnick?
Right, so I have one question. It's back to the storefront where the, where the tile, decorative tile is. Sorry, I just see the drawing. I was curious if you knew what the sill height was that you proposed it. And the follow-up question is have you studied it maybe with a lower sill height? Just curious on that.
I think we did the sill height at 18. We're lowering it a little bit to try to do what you're talking about, but we still like the idea of having some of a sort of a decorative tile base.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Schallenberger.
I know you mentioned painting the whole building, make that all tie in, but is that the only changes? I'm looking at the elevations from the parking lot and from the alley. There's nothing proposed there. Okay, thanks.
All right, comments? Anyone? Commissioner Lavoie?
Yeah, please. On the proposed elevation, I would really like to see the colonnettes between the windows on the southmost building shown so that they do not disappear. On the north elevation, actually, I wish you would take off the columns in entablature. They are obviously a product of the 70s or 80s.
Which one?
The ones that.
Oh, on the north building. Sorry.
On the north building.
Same elevation, north building.
Yeah, when you walk down the street, that's sort of like the piece that sticks out. Like, I wish this was gone away. And then when I look up and I see the bas relief under the windows, I think I kind of like those, and I'd rather not see them go away. And putting a continuous rail across the top of that just doesn't have any credibility for it. Changing out the upper windows for more traditional window is fine. I don't really have an issue with the storefront, either one of them, or the tile selection. And other than to thank the owner for trying to improve his building.
Any differing comments? Yeah. Commissioner Schallenberger?
You said differing.
No, I did.
No, just a different spin on.
Well, also positive comments, for the attempt or the effort, however you want to say that. I do like the transom above the door and bringing that from the museum. That's a nice touch. And I'm going to say a similar comment with regard to the railings. I don't know that the existing bas relief needs to remain, but I like that design solution better than a railing design, mostly because of function. The Celadon house next to it, there are some doors that conceivably could go out, and it would be a Juliet balcony. In this case, these aren't really used as a Juliet, and even 1222 is not really a functional solution to begin with. So I guess I would prefer some other design solution there. But it's hard to say that. Then you get into design, and it is within the EPV guidelines. So if it is something you want, I wouldn't oppose it. In the final analysis.
I think the owner just indicated just now that he's not into it. So.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make clear that if you design within the guidelines, you're within your rights.
That's
so
a good point.
I just want to acknowledge that. Otherwise, no. positive comments.
So would somebody like to make a motion? Or yes, comments. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Differing comments?
A little bit, or opinionated maybe. I hope. No, I just wanted to comment on the storefront. I like the storefront solutions, except I personally think if the objective is to try to gain more light and space going in, perhaps lowering the sill, maybe, I thought I turned it on. Okay, try it again. Perhaps lowering the sill. One tile, for instance, might give a little nicer sense of proportion to the window and allow feeling more of a sense of openness. And then also from the color selection palette that was shown of, I guess, examples of the tiles, I like the ones that were least contrasty. So I don't know if that's handy to pull up on the table.
Who's got the tiles?
There were two
Did you
examples.
also comment about painting the building?
Pardon me, I'm only commenting where I'm different.
Well, nobody's commented on painting.
I think
Did they?
I thought somebody did. Yeah, no, there was a sample page of example of tiles. No, it wasn't.
No, there was.
Oh, it was probably,
It's
it's probably on your drawing, no?
No, it was.
All right, who
Is that it
stuffed
there?
it in their pocket?
It went over there, I think.
Oh well, so much for that comment. Basically, this one was more contrasty, and the other one was less contrasty.
Right.
And I liked the less contrasty. I thought it was more just kind of blended into the building.
Somebody stole it.
Anything else?
That was it.
Okay, Commissioner Drury. Comments?
Differing comments. I would like to see, I think the window solution on the second floor is a good one. I would like to see these plaster of Paris decorations kept. I think they have a great resonance with what's across the street, it seems to me. And that, is it the Hunt Building? No, one in the corner of
Holly Building.
Thank you. And I certainly support the opening up of the of 1224 on the street level, opening up that space from these rather confusing windows. And I would agree with Commissioner Lavoie and these rather ineffective columns should be removed. I believe to simplify the building. Otherwise, I think it's good. Thank you.
Okay, so somebody want to make a motion?
I have a comment.
Go.
Then we can go.
Okay. Commissioner Sharp.
I know I'm in the minority, but I don't particularly think these three windows should have mutton bars, because the ones around the corner that emulate these and are a few feet away, running all the way down the alley, don't have mutton bars. And the ones on the first floor are not proposed to have mutton bars. So they're just an orphan all to themselves
Good point.
and relate to nothing on 1224. And I can understand not wanting to change these down the alley, but you do, coming down State Street, see them together.
Explicitly vague.
All right, so
how
looking
this
for
building's been
someone
built.
to make a motion? Is that a motion? Can you make a motion for 2-week continuance? Okay. And I believe Gabriella's got the comments. Good.
Yep.
Okay, so I have a motion by Schallenberger.
Okay.
Just a minute, Mr. Just a minute.
Could you ask, maybe they could come find the plans?
Yeah, the original.
That was
drawing.
part of the comments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Was the motion seconded? If not,
Not yet.
second.
Okay. So motion by Schallenberger, second by Boucher. That's for a 2-week continuance. This meeting's just going sideways. Adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.